Good evening, everyone. Many of you, I think, must have had a busy day. So now that you are here, it is time to relax and to empty your mind. This program, from the announcements, may seem like it was a teaching on heartsutra. But in reality, it is not a teaching on heartsutra. Because I am not capable of unraveling this precious text. Instead, I thought I could just share some of my thoughts on heartsutra, and then after that, then we can perhaps have more interaction, so question and answers. I really enjoy that, interacting with people as opposed to delivering a monologue. The core subject of heartsutra is obviously emptiness. Therefore, this is a very difficult text to apprehend because it deals with such a profound matter. Not just any matter, but of course emptiness. Why is emptiness profound? The Buddha said that it is not existing, it is not non-existing, it is not both of those, and it is not neither of those. So what did the Buddha mean when he made that statement? For sure, he was not trying to play with words and sort of confuse his disciples, but rather he was trying to wake up people. He was trying to wake the listener from ignorance with these statements. This statement, it is not existing, it is not non-existing, sounds somewhat contradicting, to our mind, at least to our understanding. To conventional wisdom, that just seems impossible. How can something that is not existing cannot be non-existing, and something that is not non-existing cannot be existing? Then the Buddha said, emptiness is beyond conception and beyond explanation. If that is the case, then I should have never been here in the first place. Perhaps I should pack my bags and leave. If emptiness is beyond conception and that if it cannot be explained, then why am I here, right? And why are you here? Emptiness is really a true, profound phenomena. If someone said, don't take my words for granted. All of what I said, everything that I am saying is a lie. If he said that, can you really trust him? Will you trust that person or not? You think about it. So someone comes up to you and says, everything that I've told you is a lie. Whatever I say is a lie. Whatever I say is a lie. Don't trust me. Will you trust the person? Will you trust will you take his words for the truth? Or will you not? If you take his statements for the truth, right, then you are, in a way, trusting him, right? But if you don't believe what he just said, then you are, in a way, also believing in him, right? So this is a paradox. We have a little problem here. So this is something, also some parallels with emptiness, with the concept of emptiness. Before we think of emptiness, we have to think about the seer or the thinker of emptiness. Who is the thinker? What is trying to take emptiness as its object? Obviously, it's our mind. It is our conceptual thoughts. It's our thoughts that is trying to grasp emptiness, that is trying to make sense of emptiness. It's trying to pinpoint to an object and then take that object as indeed being empty of something, right? So this is our thought process. This is how we think. This is the nature of our conceptual thoughts. Is that it is projecting out this independent object. It approaches that object as though there is no link between the object and that subjective experience. It sees the object as if the object exists from the object's own basis. So this is why we have this problem. This is why the Buddha said emptiness is beyond conception. For the simple reason that our conceptual thoughts approaches its object in a way that contradicts with the reality, with how things actually exist. Its way of apprehending the object, it goes against the reality. And that's why emptiness cannot be fully comprehended by concepts. One way of dividing phenomena is into the two truths, that is ultimate truth and conventional truth, ultimate truth and conventional truth. So these are the two truths. And conventional truth, it's almost like if we are watching a movie, then of course you will, when you're watching the movie, you say, oh, this is the name of this character, and this is the daughter, the father, the family, and this is the bad guys, the good guys, right? You would have that like universe within that story, within that movie. So that's like the conventional truth, right? And then the ultimate truth is the fact that all of those are not real. The fact that all of those things, all those characters, they're just fabricated, they're all acted out, in reality, those characters they do not exist, right? They do not exist as they are portrayed to be, as they are thought out to be. So that would be the ultimate truth. So in real life, then all the things that we see, that we experience in our daily life would fall under the category of conventional truth, and the fact that no matter how real they may appear to us, the fact that they don't exist as they appear is, of course, the ultimate truth. So we can think of ourselves as if we are watching a movie for our whole life, or like we are in this dream, right? We are like in this dream. So these are just analogies. The Buddha gave many teachings according to the mental disposition of the listener. So he gave many different levels of teaching. But of all his teachings, the Paranjaparamita Sutras are considered the most profound, the best of his teachings, the essence of his teachings. They are considered what's the word? 초두주valana? 초두주va.
Yes, supreme.
Supreme, yes. So they are considered supreme of his teachings. Why are the Pranjaparamita teachings considered the supreme most? Why? That has to do with why the Buddha gave teachings in the first place. The Buddha gave his teachings because he had immeasurable compassion and love for sentient beings. Right? He cannot bear to see sentient beings suffer. He cannot bear to see them continue to suffer in cyclic existence. To free sentient beings from samsara, of course, he cannot rescue them, like he cannot wash away their negative deeds, or he cannot take away their suffering as one could take out a thorn. So he can only share the path that he has taken, that he has perfected. So what is that path? It is the path that leads to liberation. And what leads to liberation? Of course, it is emptiness. It is only by understanding, it is only by understanding emptiness and meditating on emptiness and ultimately sort of becoming emptiness. Not meditate on emptiness as if it was a distant subject, but rather be so engrossed in the meditation of emptiness that the subjective experience actually becomes one with the object. And it is only by that practice that one is able to be free from samsaric experience. So that's why the Pranjaparamita Sutras, which deal primarily with emptiness. But I have to say that not all of Buddha's teachings that touch on emptiness would be considered Pranjaparamita, but it's the other way around, that all Pranjaparamita teachings, of course, deal with the concept of emptiness. So, therefore, since it presents the path, since it presents a complete path, a complete framework of how to overcome samsara, therefore it is considered the supreme teaching, the supreme dharma that the Buddha shared. The Buddha didn't teach the Pranjaparamita teachings or his teachings on emptiness to those who were not, I think I could say, matured enough to take on the concept of emptiness, or to those who were not interested in emptiness, or to those who wouldn't really care much about emptiness. If the person is primarily focused on the happiness of this life or the happiness of next life, then emptiness is really irrelevant. Because emptiness, it's not a subject matter like we learn at university or college, It's not something that you learn so that it sort of stimulates your senses. It's not food for thought, It's not food for thought. It's not something that you just do so that it sort of wakes you, It wakes the intellectual in you, It's not meant to be used for that purpose. Emptiness only becomes relevant when you want to be free from suffering. When you realize that there really is not much purpose if you just concentrate, if you just focus on the pleasures of this life, if you only are concerned of not falling into more misery in the next life, and therefore you are trying to create lots of good merit so that you will be born in a good place with no suffering in the future. If that is your concern, then emptiness. There's no need for emptiness. You can, if that's your purpose, then of course there are other things that can make you achieve, that you can use to achieve your goals without having to sort of go through all that confusion, without going through all that trouble. So then emptiness is irrelevant if that is the case. But for those of us who try to think more deeply, who try to sort of go beyond what we see, try to go beyond the five senses, and on a deeper level, then if the idea that as long as you are in this state of being influenced, by mental afflictions and karma, if you feel that if you don't do something about it, then that it will continue to go on like that forever, if that concerns you, then of course emptiness becomes an important subject, because without emptiness there is no way out of that state. There is no way out of suffering. Emptiness is the gateway to liberation, to moksha. And it is only by meditating on emptiness that one is able to subdue all of one's mental afflictions, So this is why emptiness is emphasized so much in the Hinayana and Mahayana teachings, because both of these yanas are concerned with attaining liberation either for oneself or for others. By now you might be wondering, this person still didn't explain why emptiness is so important. He went around and talked and still he didn't make any he didn't connect the dots, So if you think like that, then you are of course right, because I still haven't connected the dots, because those dots are very difficult to connect. They're very difficult. I always struggle with that. So it's something like this. Remember, we were talking about afflictive emotions, right? There are many different English terms like destructive emotions, mental afflictions. I think there are a few. So mainly you can think in terms of the three mental poisons: ignorance, attachment, and anger or aversion. So ignorance, those three, right? So attachment and anger are somehow like the two wings of ignorance, right? Ignorance in the middle, and those are the two wings. They are the two faces of ignorance. Attachment is maybe the pleasant face of ignorance, and anger not so pleasant version of ignorance. And ignorance unites these two extreme emotions. So what is ignorance? We use that word all the time, right? That I'm ignorant of this subject. Ignorant, of course, applies. It means something that you don't know something, right? And this is precisely what ignorance is that it doesn't see reality as it is. It's ignorant about the nature of reality. On the contrary, it sees the opposite of what things really are, how things really exist. It sees the opposite of that. In other words, we call it the self-grasping mind. The self-grasping mind. That is ignorance. Self-grasping mind, right? So, I can use many words to describe that, but I don't know if it would really benefit you or myself at all. We say self-grasping mind is that consciousness that grasps an intrinsic property onto the object that projects out this intrinsic property, intrinsic nature onto the object. It really sounds a little technical, I think, right? Because that's what we have to resort to, those technical terms. We use those technical terms, and then we try to see if our natural way of thinking really fits that description. Right now, I think most of you are all looking at me, and I'm trying to look at all of you, but I find that quite challenging, to look at all of you. What's going on right now? If you ask this question to yourself, what am I seeing? Of course, you are seeing the room, you are seeing people. Then where is this self-grasping mind? All those consciousness that we have been experiencing. Of course, we are experiencing something, but what is it that we are experiencing? What is it? From the moment we started, about an hour ago, did this self-grasping mind, did this mind that projects out this intrinsic property to the object did it ever come? Did we experience that? If you ask this question to yourself, again, I think that is a hard question. Because, first of all, we normal human beings aren't so engrossed with our emotions. We are always looking outwards, right? We are always looking out there. Because if we try to look at ourselves, then we don't see anything. So that is a big hurdle we face when trying to pinpoint this so-called ignorance. We talk about it, but can we pinpoint that? Can we say, this is it? I just had this experience of ignorance. I think many people would like to have this, when they go to the initiation, especially the higher ones, we hear the word great bliss. And then some people, they try to meditate, and then they sometimes say, I think I felt it. I felt great bliss, But I think what is more important, but before you feel great bliss, I think you have to first feel ignorance. You have to feel the bliss of ignorance. This is, I think, very important. Because, of course, ignorance is bliss. In a way, it is bliss. It is a form of bliss. So, if we try to point to this self-grasping mind, then it is somewhat challenging. Now, to bypass this problem of really trying to pointing to it, then of course there are different schools of thought, and in one theory, then it is that to bypass this problem, there's a very easy solution, and that is all conceptual thoughts are self-grasping mind. So you don't need to point it. You don't need to try to search for it. We know that we are feeling something right now, right? That is it. That is self-grasping mind. All conceptual thoughts are self-grasping mind. All conceptual thoughts project out, not only project, but they indeed grasp at this intrinsic property. So this is one idea, this is one way, one approach. Now, there is one problem to this approach. Because as we said, that self-grasping mind is ignorance, right? Ignorance means that it doesn't see the nature of reality. What it sees is that it sees something that is not in tune with reality. By definition, it means that whatever it is that it is grasping at is not in tune with reality. If it is not in tune with reality, then it must not exist. So therefore, if we follow with that model and indeed think that all conceptual minds are self-grasping mind, that they're all self-grasping, then that is to reject all conceptual thoughts. It is to reject the validity of all conceptual thoughts, which would of course include the bodhicitta mind, or at least the bodhicitta mind of the beginner, right? And also that would also include the conceptual mind, our conceptual understanding of emptiness. That would also include the correct conceptual understanding of emptiness. And if one is to say that all those are self-grasping, then that is to, in essence, accept that they are all flawed, that they are not valid, that whatever it is that they are grasping at does not exist. So it is indirectly one has to reject all the main objects of those thoughts. So therefore there is this distinction between valid concepts and invalid concepts. When I think of myself, or when I conceptualize you, that conceptual thought is considered valid. For the simple reason that you exist. The concept of me, of I, is valid because I exist. So whatever exists, then the thought that conceptualizes that object is considered valid. Of course, when we say valid, we should not overemphasize validity. We only say it is valid in a conventional sense. So it doesn't matter which words you use to describe something. You try to think about the meaning, right? You try to think about the meaning. Even though we would say, this is real, and films and TV serials are not real, right? Most of us would say that. When we say, this is real, that this is happening, whereas those movies, they're all acted out. There are different levels of realities. Compared to films, then what's happening here, what happened a few days before, of course everyone would consider that real, you know. It's more tangible, it's more solid. You are actually in this. This is not being acted out. I hope not. Right? So, when we say this is real, we need to have a reference point. Compared to those fabrications, to those illusion-like objects, we would say, this is real. You know, that's our reference point. That's not real. This is real. So again, when we say, when us who are not trained with the idea of emptiness, when we talk about reality, we also tend to use a reference point. And when the person who realizes emptiness then looks at herself or himself or looks out to the surrounding world, then the person sees everything like we are seeing the movie. So when we say emptiness is the ultimate truth, we are only saying that from the viewpoint of the Arya being. From my own viewpoint, it cannot be, because emptiness is beyond my conception. To me, it's not a reality. I'm just resorting to using words. I'm desperate. I'm just trying to, it's like now, to come up with this analogy, I think would be almost impossible. That would require a character from one of those movies to be real and then try to make that character then sort of like come to this world and then talk with me, and a lot of things need to be lot of interactions need to be made, and then only then would I be able to come up with a good analogy. So I think that would be very hard, very difficult. But anyhow, if we have not tasted emptiness, if we don't have a good grasp of emptiness, then emptiness is just words. It's mere words. And it's the same thing, that what we see, everything, still will continue to appear as so real. Only after realizing emptiness would we then relate to this world as being mirage-like, you know, illusion-like. But until we know emptiness, then this will continue to be real as always. It's very difficult, and that is why emptiness is beyond conception. That you cannot use words to describe it and then really make sense to you. Of course, it makes sense to us, maybe on an intellectual level, but on an experiential level, that's not happening now. It's not happening. We can only try to use analogies. We can only rely on those teachings and then try to sort of imagine, right? try to imagine, and it's like asking a person who was born blind to visualize the color of rainbow. How would that person try to visualize rainbow? Someone who is born blind. That would be very difficult. I don't want to leave it here now, because then I think it will be very dark. Then you will feel, oh, emptiness is so dark. It's so discouraging, you know. So I want to say, of course, emptiness, as pessimistic the idea may seem to be, yet it also has a brighter side, right? What is the brighter side of emptiness? It is dependent arising, yeah? Because of emptiness, therefore, there is room for dependent arising. There is room for dependent origination. Without emptiness, the world will stand still. But because of emptiness, the world revolves. Everything works because of emptiness. Because everything depends on a causal factor. Everything is connected in one way or another. Therefore, they don't have an intrinsic, independent quality to them, because they are interconnected with others. So this is the bright side of emptiness. Because if you see that emptiness, it just means there is no intrinsic quality to anything, right? If things had this intrinsic quality, then that quality has to be independent of everything, because it's its own intrinsic property. The fact that it arises because of causes and conditions, therefore it doesn't have this unique property that is independent of others. And somehow, when we think, when attachment and anger arises, moments before those two emotions happens, we go through a process where we project out this really intrinsic good quality or an intrinsic bad quality, a bad intrinsic quality or a positive intrinsic quality onto the object, and that results in attachment and anger. So this is why emptiness is considered profound, because one reason is that with it then you can subdue your deepest delusions, and number two, because in order to realize it, in order to really understand, really taste it, really see it, without having to go through projecting out a mental image, one would first have to have an understanding of it on the conceptual level. And for that to happen, of course, conceptual thoughts by its own nature always projects out this intrinsic property onto its subject. and therefore it is very difficult to even understand it on a conceptual level. So with that, I will stop, and we will have, I think, maybe if anyone of you would like to share some ideas or shares or like have some questions, then we will proceed with that.
Rinpoche, thank you for the teachings. I have two questions. One question is that in your earlier teaching in the emptiness portions, emptiness is important. Emptiness is the way to achieve liberations. And then to achieve it, you also mentioned that we need to meditate on emptiness. So my question is, how do we meditate on emptiness? That's question number one. Question number two, I read on the text on is essence of true illusion. We talk about three types of unreality: identity unreality, production unreality, and ultimate unreality. Can I know what is different is this ultimate unreality and the two truths of ultimate truth?
I didn't understand that.
Okay, one of the texts in
question.
Essence of Illusions talk about three types of unreality, which identity unreality, production unreality,
Identity,
unreality,
identity,
unreality.
reality,
Unreality, that's right.
reality,
Unreality.
unreality,
Sorry.
unreality.
And
Okay.
production unreality, and then the third one they talk about ultimate unreality.
Oh,
What do you
okay.
mean by ultimate unreality versus the two truths of ultimate truth?
Okay. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
the first, so those are the questions, right?
Yes.
The first question is a very good question. How do we meditate on emptiness? This is what I've been talking for 1.5 hours. It's very, very difficult, right? Well, first, before we meditate, of course, we have to understand, we have to think, we have to point our mind towards emptiness, right? We have to sort of tune our mind so that it's in tune with the nature of reality, right? For that, of course, we listen to the Dharma and then we think. As beginners, of course, we have to use words. We have to use these concepts. Without relying on these words, it would be impossible for us to sort of just jump into that experience of emptiness. Emptiness, one does not bump into emptiness by chance. That does not happen, you know. So, first studying on emptiness, analyzing the reality is I think one of the conditions. So when we study, then it's important that we know what we are talking about. For emptiness is a negative phenomena, right? It's always it has to be known by negating something, right? So it's considered a negative phenomena. So what is it that we are negating? That's very important, that you have to make sure that what you're negating is really what needs to be negated and not something else. Because then if that is not clear, and if you try to negate something, then you might negate what should not be negated and then fall in the pitfalls of one of the two extremes, right? So it's important. So again, that intrinsic property is what we are negating. So we have to be very clear on that. And then meditating meditation. What is meditation? First let's not worry about emptiness. What is meditation? This is again another difficult subject. We all use that word, meditation, and many people would associate sitting in the seemingly correct posture and then lightly breathing and closing one's eyes, and then one would say, I am meditating. And others would say, that person is meditating in deep samadhi. So, if this is our idea of what meditation is, then I think we have serious homework to do. We have many homework. And it is, of course, Je Rinpoche in his Lamrim Chenmo, the extensive graduated path to enlightenment, I think talks about that in great detail. And I know that many of that some of you had the good fortune of attending the Lamrim teachings, the Changju Lamrim Chenmo teachings in India the past 4 years, right? So I think you could draw on that when it comes to the subject of meditation. Of course, meditation has a connotation of habituating oneself with the object, bringing it closer, being more fixated on that, right? So that's all I can. That's the first question. And regarding your second question, I think you are talking of the 3 lakshanas, right? Is it the 3 definitions or thingisum?
Unreality. Identity, unreality.
Oh yes, the 3 identities, right? So the third one, which is ultimate
Unreality.
ultimate reality.
Unreality.
Ultimate unreality. What is unreality?
샘사비카 아니 든당공이 몇바 그와 세니공이 몇바 개왕공이 몇바
영두 변다방 의원님의 봐. 나가다 생일숨도 쓰고 알아. 생일숨. Yes. So the third one, and then the ultimate truth within the context of the 2 truths. Are they the same thing or not? That is the question, right? So this, I think, of course, back at the monasteries, then, we have different official texts. So according to some, they would be the same, but according to some other, they would necessarily not have to be the same. But I think even if you go with Je Rinpoche's work here, there are 2 stages where it might seem a little contradicting, right? But I think I would go, because of my own bias, because I follow one text, right? And then Venerable here follows in another text. So, so we have maybe some little different viewpoints. So, according to the text, the official text that I follow, then those 2 are the same. They are the same. Yes. 지수인 있나? this 개발숨으로 용주비는 전달되면 입에 맞췄어. 간사다음에 용주비 숨 말해라. 그러 간사다음에다 전달되면 인숙 말아. 내 센스를 눌러라. So if you're talking of this primarily, yes, because the answer that I gave is in a way not very clear, because it seems that you're using these 3 terms, and if you're talking about this in the context of Chittamatra, then of course, according to the text that I follow, that they would be the same. Now, with Prasangika, right? In the Prasangika system, then they would be the same. Yongdrup tang, Tandam temba. Yongdrup Tandam temba. Tunjin isora. Umatinjulula. Yes. So Prasangika system, same. In the Chitta Matra system, again different texts, right? Different texts. So according to my official text, then they are the same in the Chitta Matra system. Yes. Okay, so would any more questions? Yes.
They always say that the emptiness and bodhicitta, they are in union, and you understand one, it grows the other one. So may I ask, how does the understanding of emptiness help one to arise more bodhicitta? That's question number one. Question number two is, in the final stage of the path of accumulation, how does one seize the true emptiness to enter the stage of seeing?
Okay, I got number one. What is number two?
Number two is in the final stages of the path of accumulation, how does one see the true emptiness in order to enter the path of seeing?
At the end of the path of accumulation.
Path of accumulation.
But then there is
how does one see the true emptiness to enter the stage of or the path of seeing?
Okay, so with the first question, I think, His Holiness always explains that if you think of emptiness, then that backs up compassion, because compassion is the wish to wish others be free from suffering. And if you have the correct understanding of emptiness, then you know that it is possible that you can overcome, that one can overcome samsara, that one can overcome delusions, because ignorance can be overcome because of emptiness. You know emptiness, right? So therefore, then that the better your understanding of emptiness is, then that gives backing to that sense of wishing that others be free from suffering, because it is possible. You know it is possible. Without understanding emptiness, then you might wish others, may they be free from suffering. It's merely a wish. That wish is not backed up by reasoning or by understanding that indeed is possible. So likewise, if it helps with compassion, then it automatically would enhance the generation of bodhicitta. Then regarding question number two, you said that at the end of the path of accumulation, then how does one then progress into the path of seeing? But I believe that there is another path, the path of connecting, right? So path of accumulation is the first path, and then the path of connecting, path of preparation, and then the path of seeing. Yes. So there is one more path, and of course, how does the first question? I think I can sort of like say, how does one progress from the path of accumulation to the path of preparation? Then that is that when the practitioner on the path of accumulation has a sound understanding of emptiness, and when that understanding of emptiness transforms into a more deeper meditation, and when that person, by way of meditating on emptiness, by way of single-pointedly concentrating on emptiness, if if that practice is able to bring about a sense of joy, I'll just use that term for the time being. If that is able, if that is able to bring a sense of joy, then one then progresses from the first part to the second part, right? And then from then, now in this moment, of course, even though the previous understanding of emptiness, which was mainly on a more contemplation level, has now become a more solid meditation. It has so let me just rephrase and say, when the practitioner of the path of accumulation then generates vipassana, right, on emptiness, that is when one progresses into the path of preparation. Yes. Now this is still on the conceptual level, and furthermore, when that conceptual thought transforms into the non-conceptual thought, then that is the transformation from the path of preparation to the path of seeing. It sounds really easy, doesn't it? So easy. I feel really embarrassed. Yes. By the way, that was not me. That was like a dictionary just walking, just talking. That's like my Google or Siri. That was Siri. That was not me. So now we'll have the final question.
Rinpoche, can you say a few words on Nagarjuna's view on how the I and all phenomena are merely labeled?
Nagarjuna's words on how the I and phenomena are all merely labeled. Nagarjuna composed the 6 treatises on Mula Madhyamaka. Riktsok Truk. Riktsok. Not Uma Riktsok Truk. Mula Madhyamaka. I think that is correct. No, maybe not the Mula bit. It will be his 6 treatises on Madhyamaka. The first 5 presents mainly emptiness. Using many different approaches to emptiness. Then the 6th, Precious Garland, then talks more of the path to enlightenment, the more general path. Talks about the 6 perfections. So not only emphasizing on emptiness, not only emphasizing on the rationale for emptiness. So I think, for example, the Mula Madhyamaga Karika, the fundamental root verse, or the root verse of the fundamental way, the root verse on the fundamental way, on the middle way, that talks again mostly about emptiness and the reasons for that. I think there's one part where Nagarjuna uses is it like something like the 5-point logic or the 5-point reasoning to establish emptiness. Namngi Riparwa. Even these 5 points, they are all again explaining and analyzing from a negative aspect by way of cancelling all the other alternatives. That's how you get to emptiness. It's only by cancelling out all the alternatives. It's not through looking, not through analyzing, not through substantiating the object and then trying to take one quality out of that, not taking an optimistic approach, not taking an optimistic analysis, substantializing the object. If you use that approach, then you would fall into that extreme of substantialism. Nagarjuna in Mulamati Megakarika says very clearly that there is no phenomena that is not dependent arising. Therefore, there is no phenomena that is not empty of this inherent existence. This he makes very clear. It's not coming into my mind right now whether Nagarjuna gives a clear explanation of how things exist other than in an empty way. I'm not aware that he explains it clearly in any of those 5 treatises of the middle way. Chandrakirti then quotes Sutras, I think Hinayana Sutras, and quotes the analogy of the chariot. How with all those parts of the chariot, by way of those parts, that is how the chariot is labeled by the assembly of all those single parts. Then the chariot is labeled, and likewise all phenomena is labeled in such fashion. So Chandrakirti in Madhyamaka Avataranama makes that clear, but in Nagarjuna's works, I'm not sure that he gave a very clear analogy of how things are labeled. It seemed that he always talked more of the empty side, the more empty nature, and didn't emphasize too much the labeling aspect. Because that in a way makes sense, because if you understand emptiness correctly, then the labeling part is something that one does not have to struggle with. It comes naturally, right? But then down the line, because there seem to be misunderstandings as a result of not making those fine points very clear, then the later students of Nagarjuna and the students of the students, disciples of the disciples down the lineage, then they made it more clear, made those lines more clear. If you can remember something from Nagarjuna's text of how it is labeled. But this is dependent origination, I think, right? Of course, Nagarjuna makes that clear, as I just quoted, but he doesn't give analogies of how things are labeled and doesn't make it clear like Chandrakirti did. Or else, if Nagarjuna really made it very clear, then it would be sort of pointless for Chandrakirti to make that very clear in Madhyamaka Avataranama. So I have some doubts. But you're right, because that verse says that everything is everything now labeled. Labeled. Everything is labeled by depending on something. Everything is labeled by way of dependent origination. Yes, that much is clear. What was your question? You have to make very clear, because I don't understand.
Mainly to explain what it means, what merely labeled means. What does merely labeled mean?
Oh, merely labeled.
Yeah, when they say merely labeled, what does that actually mean?
Empty.
That means that-
Empty. That's merely labeled. Empty. If it is empty, it is merely labeled, and vice versa. Now I feel like I'm sitting Tamja. Yes, but I think it would be nice if I can at one point find, of course, from Nagarjuna's other treatise. So this is why I was saying the 6 treatise. Yeah, but I think I'm sure that in Dogundu, right? In Dogundu, that's the compendium of sutras, which was also composed by Nagarjuna, and here he quotes many of the Buddha's works regarding emptiness. So I'm sure Nagarjuna, Acharya Nagarjuna must have quoted some of those analogies from the sutras. But at least in those 6 treatises that are his main texts on the middle way, I'm not sure if it is made very clear, other than saying dependent origination is empty, all that is empty is dependent arising. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last very short question.
Of course.
Actually, I try to have a shortcut to understand what is emptiness. So I pray to Lord Mansuri, please bless me with the wisdom to understand emptiness.
Right.
So last December, we went for the retreat, Mansuri retreat. So when we are reciting the mantra, and it just happened naturally that you go into bliss. So after that, second session, there's another kind of bliss, but it's all different form. So the question I want to ask is, how do I know this is the correct emptiness? Is it, or have I achieved a certain concentration?
Okay.
Or is this different form that make me afraid when I practice at home?
Okay.
Because it's all different form, like when you just stop, everything stop, then you dare not to proceed further, to meditate further.
Okay. So your question is, how do you know?
This is the correct.
How do you know when you know emptiness? Right? Okay. Okay. So maybe I think you can first, with what I said before, you maybe I think you didn't translate, right?
No.
Okay. Okay. Maybe you can do that first.
Okay.
And then I can think about how do I know when I know emptiness. So I think to these questions, I think the order of the questions can be applied to the graduated path to enlightenment. So we began with how does one meditate on emptiness, to then how does one progress from the path of accumulation to the path of seeing and so forth. And then it was about once, of course, you realize emptiness, you see emptiness, and then you come out of that samadhi, and then you see everything like illusory-like. So that's dependent origination, that's an aspect of dependent origination. And then once you see all of that, then you ask yourself, do I really know emptiness? Yes, so this is a really good order. I mean, are you sure that this was not scripted? So this is what I said. Maybe this was all a big act, everything was scripted, No. So that is a really good question, and of course, Gyaltsen Rinpoche, in his commentary to Mulla Mati Mega, I think has a few pages on that. He has a few words on whether the fact that whether the existence of emptiness is actually whether is that known by the mind that sees emptiness. Does the mind that knows emptiness know that emptiness exists? Those are difficult questions in a way. But if one is asking, do I know emptiness? Obviously, one does not know emptiness. You only know that you know emptiness when you know emptiness. Right? Yes, you know that you know emptiness only when you really know emptiness. Yes, yes. So that's the answer. Yes, it's I think very difficult. It's really difficult. But excuse me.
Like, it is like I just achieved concentration. And not, because according to the Lamdrin third book,
The first of the 9.
no, it's beginning, just able to achieve the first concentration. Maybe.
The first of which? Of how many numbers are there? There's one with the 9 numbers.
Over the 9 stages, the first rookie or second.
Oh no! I think it's the most beginner stage.
Then
Is
is
it
Samadhi the first, the beginner stage.
beginner
right?
stage? Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, 4 is
Beginner stage.
I don't know because I don't think because right now I'm having trouble knowing the scope of your question, so therefore I cannot I cannot give the answer, right? Maybe once I know emptiness, then I can tell you whether you know emptiness or not. Okay. Thank you.